I don't know that. I don't know that I'd agree with the last part of what you said. There's a real split. It's interesting that you went and interviewed Crichton because there's a real split in U.S. literature between commercial literature, novels like that Crichton writes, Stephen King, Tom Clancy. Who are the other big? Grisham, the law guy. Some of which are really pretty good, but they're and they make a great deal of money, and there's a whole lot of demand for them. And then there is still, and I think it's probably like this in well, it's probably not quite. There's probably more demand for serious books in Europe, but here there's a small pocket of probably I don't know, 500,000. Say 1 million readers who, many of whom are from the upper classes and have good educations and have been taught the pleasures of hard work in reading or music or art and like that. So I mean, when you're talking to me, you're talking to somebody who doesn't have very much power in the culture and who's not very important except in a fairly small. I don't know what the analog would be. It would be something like maybe contemporary classical music in the U.S., which there are people who enjoy it and listen to it, partly because of training and partly because they're disposed to be willing to do a certain amount more work reading it. But compared to popular music and rock and roll and hip hop and stuff, classical music is nothing. I mean, economically or commercially, or in terms of how many people have heard of it, or how much an influence it has on the culture. So, and for me personally, I don't know that it's really ever been all that different. I think probably American education used to be a little bit better and a little bit more difficult, and children had no choice but to realize that there were certain things that were hard and involved a certain amount of drudgery that were actually very satisfying at the end of it. But for the most part, I think in the U.S., people who've been doing, quote, serious stuff, which is harder and stranger, have always played to a much smaller audience.
What is literature able to do that other? Sorry.
I saw this on the sheet of paper.
Yeah, because I had to
Good.
that.
Good. So let me ask you first, and then I'll about what is it that literature can do that other things can't do?
Well,
it's not so easy, is it?
No, not at all. But I thought you're more intelligent than I am, so I thought. Well, actually, I read this in this interview, and you said something as that good art somehow is able to not make you feel alone in this. And that is something actually that I'm very addicted to, because I'm simple as I am. I'm very I'm very happy when I don't feel this so lonesome when I read something. And I also, when in good literature is something very musical to me sometimes. That I had that with Bernhard very much, because the sicker he got in his life, the easier the words became, and it was some kind of music.
Huh.
So for me, I have the beauty of the words and also this musical thing about it. And then also sometimes something philosophical and not feeling alone. That's what.
Can we just put that in? That's a better answer to the question than I could have given.
No. First I had to answer that. It's your
well,
turn.
Play back the tape of what she said, and I'll just no. It's a heavy question. There's something musical about it because it has to do with patterns of meaning that develop over time. There's stuff for me about reading that isn't like looking at a piece of art, because there I choose how long I look and what I look at, and I'm being directed through a linear flow of time. But in a piece of music or in a movie, that flow is directed for me. I've really got no choice but to follow it. Whereas books, it's weird. I'm moving through time through this thing, but I can also, I don't know whether you do it or not, but if I've read a paragraph I like a lot, I go back and I read it over again. So I'm trapped in time, but I've got more mobility within that time. And then I think, there's other writers I've talked to about this, and most of us who end up doing this like to read as kids, probably for the same reason you did. There's, I'm trying to think of a way to say it where it isn't just sounds stupid and simple. But it goes without saying that there are 4 of us in this room. I'm sure we all seem fairly pleasant. We don't. There are big limits on what we'll ever know about each other. I don't know what's in your mind right now. God knows I don't know what's in his mind right now. There is a way for me, and I'm not really talking. I'm talking more as a reader, that when I'm reading something that's good and that's real, I'm able to jump over. I'm able to kind of jump over that wall of self and inhabit somebody else in a way that I can't, that we can't in regular life. But when I do inhabit that other person, very often what they're thinking or saying or feeling are things very much the way I do, but I'm scared there's something wrong with me that I do and nobody else does. There's a tremendous reassurance about that kind of communion and empathy. And then it gets more complicated because I'm also getting access to the mind of the author in a way that we don't have access to each other talking this way and stuff. And so there is, it's most of the friends I've got, and most of my friends don't like to read. Most of the friends I've got who don't like to read find it A, boring, and B, just kind of lonely and slow. And I just don't get it because I'm watching television for me, although it's easier, is much lonelier. Watching flat images on a flat screen, doing interesting things, and often they're very easy to look at, is very different from knowing what it's like to be inside somebody else's skin, or knowing what it's like to be able to spend 2 hours with an author who somehow can make me feel like I know what it is. I mean, it just seems like a form of magic to me.
And is it also comfort?
I can't remember which American writer it was who I heard him speak, and he said that his job is to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. And so there's something comforting about being able to inhabit somebody else, but there's something also very uncomfortable about it, because usually the experiences that person is having are just the ones that I don't like or that I haven't worked out. And it seems to me that the biggest split isn't between music and literature or music and sculpture or whatever. There are forms of art that offer us escapes from ourselves and our daily lives, and I think that's fine in small doses. And then there are kinds of art that offer us more sort of confrontation with our own lives. And I don't think it's surprising that there isn't as much demand or as much money in the latter, because it's more difficult and less pleasant sometimes. And it takes skill and education to get good enough at reading or listening to be able to derive pleasure from it. There's class stuff involved here that gets very tricky. But I think it's worthwhile. I think reading and writing are both worthwhile. That's very profound. Okay. Did good for a while. In the middle there, that was lucid. All I did was parrot back what you said, but I took like 10 times as long.
No, that's
and
not
I did this a lot more. So. Boy, is it hot in here now.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, yeah.
So, we are right into something that I actually have. Do you want me to get you a little bit of water or something?
No, I'm fine. I'll just be sweating here in my chair.
Like,
it's fine.
the,
Not a problem.
like the typical American.
Yes, the sweaty American. I'm proud to sweat on behalf of the USA. If you do work like this, you pay certain prices. You don't make as much money. Not as many people read your stuff. But the people who are reading it and are interested in it, you're pretty sure. Like, the thing that I like about doing this kind of stuff is that I'm pretty sure my readers are about as smart as I am. You know, I think if you're somebody like Crichton or, you know, somebody who's like a Harvard MD, but you're writing for a mass audience, things get very strange. I don't worry that people who are reading my stuff are misunderstanding it or banalizing it any more than it's already banal. I do worry weirdly about when it's translated into languages that I don't know. I worry that, I mean, I don't know what's in there. You know, I don't know.
One thing that also very much appealed to me is when you spoke in an interview about existential loneliness. You know, of the yeah.
I said the word existential loneliness.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe, you know, I'm German and I sometimes get things right wrong, but
No. Okay.
But, and that's something, you know, I very much like to hear an author say, because that's the one thing I'm searching in the things I read. I'm searching for this testimonies of existential loneliness. So, is that something you still relate to, or?
Well, yeah. If I understand your question, this is the stuff that we were talking about 2 questions ago. There's something painful about being stuck in a body and a consciousness that can't ever except through sort of conversation, can't ever be inside anybody else's. And there's a magic about. Except, see, I don't know that much about music. People who do say that there is a purity with which the composer's emotional state can be felt by the listener that can't be approached by anything else either. There's probably most kinds of art have this sort of magical thing of, for a moment, there's a kind of reconciliation and communion between you and me that isn't possible in any other way. No, it's weird to be saying this on television. But see, there's something about the. There's nothing wrong. It's not that there's anything wrong with being interested in stuff that's interesting and attractive. What it seems to me like here is that television and corporate entertainment, in order to make. Because it's so expensive, in order to make money, it has to appeal to a very wide audience, which means it has to find things that a lot of people have in common. And I don't know about you, but here, I think what most of us have in common here are our very most base, uninteresting, selfish, stupid interests. Physical attractiveness, sex, a certain kind of easy humor, vivid spectacle. I mean, that stuff that I will immediately look at, and so will you, and so will you, and so, right? So it's in our very most base and kind of childish interests that we are a mass. The things that make us interesting and unique and human, those interests tend to be wildly different between different people. So my guess is, in terms of American mass culture as a mass, for things to get significantly different, what it's going to involve is fragmentation in the entertainment industry. When something like what's happened in the American magazine industry, where instead of 3 or 4 magazines with millions of subscribers, you have thousands of magazines, each with a few thousand. That is, if entertainment can get more niche-y, N-I-C-H-E is the English word, it's possible that these companies that put the stuff out can stay alive and make money without having to appeal to 10, 20 million people. Because I don't think it's evil. I think it's just the way that it works. The only way to get 10 or 20 million people all interested in the same thing is to pitch your appeal very, very low. Because maybe you're not interested in any of the things that I named, you know, just immediately, but I am. I'm no different than anybody else. There are a few people who aren't interested in it at all, but I am.